can you see this person's perspective,
Right.
but can you see beyond this barrier that is in front of you right now? And we do get to that place of gratitude and actually appreciation. Now, it takes us refusing to stay in a victim mindset in order to do that.
Welcome in, everybody. It is launch date time in the Music City.
Launch date in the Music City.
Don't you look cute? I like your hair up that way.
Thank you. I was feeling my little 10-year-old little today, and I said, you know what, girls, you just rock that little ponytail on top of your head. And anybody that don't like it, they can sit and spin.
I did. Mine was my 6th grader with my side pony.
There you go.
See, that's what we do. We got, and part of today's show is a little bit about that, is finding that little within you and going, you're okay. We carry around some stuff for years and years and years. And sometimes we need to just forgive. And forgive is a tough word. Can we start with can we open that can of worms? Because you sent me a text this morning. And it was almost too heavy for me to carry in on. My phone couldn't even hold the charge after you sent that text.
That was one of those nudges I got this morning. It was like, you know what? We're oftentimes expected to forgive, but sometimes we don't want to forgive. And it's not that we're pissed off. It's not that we are angry. It's not that we're sad. We just have not processed, and we just are not ready to fully commit to what forgiveness actually means. We're real good at saying, oh, girl, I forgive you, or, oh, honey, it's okay. And then we catch ourselves later going, I'm still a little salty about that, and I'm not quite over it yet. And forgiveness is actually not that. So, yes, you're absolutely correct. We go through our lives carrying around incredibly emotionally heavy backpacks that we didn't even pick out, but we're carrying all the weight in it. And when we become adults, it becomes time to sit down and decide how much of that actually works for us now and how much of it doesn't, and then begin removing that.
I have cut people out of my life. I remember this guy. I mean, I wasn't a jock in school, and I wasn't one of the popular kids in school. I was a brain kid, and my parents were teachers, and I had to make great grades. So that's where I was. But I had a lot of friends, and I had a lot of people that, that's, and we might have looked like the island of misfit toys, but that was okay with me and with them. I mean, we were okay. And one of the kids, I remember saying something in him, and I wanted to be popular with the popular kids. So they were kind of picking on him, and I kind of jumped in on the fray. I didn't make fun of him, but I said something that was mean in the moment because I wanted to seem cool. I carried that for years, and I wouldn't forgive myself. And I went to my 30th class reunion, and there he was. And I took his hands and I apologized to him, and he didn't remember it happening. Which in that moment, I realized I have agonized over this for 30 years. 30 years I have carried this heavy load. He didn't even remember it, but he said, I so appreciate you saying that. And I'm really glad that I asked that moment, because on our 40th reunion, and if my friend Hutch is watching, my 40th reunion, he was no longer with us. And because that's the nature of life. I mean, some of us will be there at 30, and some of us will be there at 40, and some of us won't be.
Right.
But in that instance, I realized, number one, I carried that 30 pounds of weight for too long. And number two is that it didn't matter as much to him as it did to me. I was the one with the weight.
Right.
So I know that everybody is joining us right now. And I thought, let's just say hello to everybody first and kind of get started, because this is a big subject and they're starting to already add to it. Leslie, hello. And Lisa, who joins us today. Candy, got to have lunch with Candy this week, so it was really great to see her. Elizabeth is with us and starts in on the conversation. Forgiveness took me a very, very long time when I began my recovery journey. That's part of the recovery. That's part of the recovery is forgiveness. Now I'm gonna turn this over to and Suzanne is watching. Don't want to leave her out. And
Hey there,
Corinne is with us. Hello, hello. So let's
Nice.
start talking about forgiveness.
Where you want to start?
Okay. You said we
Oh,
don't
you tell
forgive.
me where you want to start. I'm gonna grab this bone from this dog real quick.
Okay. I want to start with when someone does something that we literally can't forgive in our own way. Something does someone, you said we don't not forgive because we're angry no, sometimes I'm going to tell you, I had some anger that I carried around toward people who did me wrong and hurt me in an irrevocable, unstoppable way. And I carried those wounds and still do, to be honest. I still
Sure.
carry those. So forgiveness couldn't come from me because I couldn't even manufacture it. Let's talk about forgiving the unforgivable first.
Well, the unforgivable would depend on it's subjective, right? So it depends on what one deems as unforgivable. Because what you might deem as unforgivable may not be unforgivable for me. So I want to be clear in the sense that, yes, there is forgiveness. And there's, and we can decide when we want to, and if there's anger there, yes, working through that. But the not forgiving until you're truly ready to forgive is the, the energy with that. Because once you forgive, then you let it go. And, it doesn't mean forgiving. I hear people say all the time, well, I might forgive, but I'm not going to forget. Well, if we are working with any fraction of our brain, we pretty much recognize that we're not going to forget certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay too. It's about being, and I say this from a place of love and complete compassion. It's about loving ourselves enough to stop kicking ourselves in the ass because somebody else did something to us that we didn't like. Because does it hurt? Yes. But, we've all heard the Buddhist, hanging on to anger is like, drinking poison and expecting it to kill the other person, or holding on to a hot coal and expecting it to burn somebody else. If it means that much to us, and if it's someone who is close to us, then we have to charge ourselves with being adult enough to say, hey, this has hurt my feelings, or I'm having a hard time working through this. Now, there are going to be some people that are not safe people, and you're not going to have that conversation with them.
Yeah.
I also want to throw this out there. I've got incense burning in the back. So if you see little wasps of smoke going by me, one, it's not spirit circling me, and two, the house is not burning down.
Elizabeth shares, the game changer for me was when a very dear friend told me forgiveness doesn't mean saying what someone did is okay. It simply means I am letting go of it. That's huge.
Well, you're no longer, when we truly work into forgiveness, we're no longer building from a very basic level. We're no longer building and storing the cortisols, all of the chemicals and the hormones in our body that keep us revved up on ready, set, go. We're not doing that anymore. So we're actually doing ourselves. Forgiveness is for us. It has nothing to do with another person.
Corinne says a relative recently said they felt bad for something that happened 41 years ago. Not an apology, but the best they could do told them the baggage is too heavy to carry all these years. So sometimes an apology isn't, I'm sorry I did that. Sometimes it's not even admitting fault. Sometimes if they admit that they acknowledge that they did it, that they know it happened. Sometimes the awareness is all you need to feel better in moving forward. And like Elizabeth, I love when you bring those platitudes. Those folks ain't living rent free in our heads.
That's right.
I love it. Brilliant. Brilliant.
And here's the other thing, Devon. Sometimes things happen and it's not, we get so far outside of ourselves with, they did this to me and they did this and they did this. But one of the biggest and most meaningful forgivenesses that come um, around the bend, so to speak, for us is our ability to forgive ourselves. And I will use this as an example. My grandmother went to a doctor's appointment when I was 19 years old. And she went in for, we didn't know they were going to keep her. They ended up keeping her. And she ended up having open heart surgery the next day.
Wow.
So that night I stayed with her. And other family members would have been there, but there were babies and there were just all kinds of stuff going on. And so I stayed with her. And I remember waking up about 3:00 in the morning, and she was at St. Thomas Hospital. And from the way the light was shining in from like the Target area into her hospital room, I could see her sitting up in the bed. And I looked over and I said, "What are you doing up? Like, why are you awake right now?" And she was like, "I was just thinking." So she proceeds to tell me things about her life and about our family and about just sharing this sage advice in these words and sharing her heart with me. And sometime in between 3 and 6:00, my 19-year-old self drifted back off to sleep while she was talking. And they came in to get her at 6 the next morning to take her to surgery, and she never came out of that surgery.
Wow.
So my forgiveness was to forgive myself for something that was really in my mind at the time, unforgivable.
Mm-hmm.
Falling asleep on my grandmother when I loved her more than life itself, and not hearing her talk to me.
Yeah.
So there are things that happen in our lives that we have to work towards forgiveness, because I can assure you that from 19 to about 24 or 25, I punished the shit out of myself.
Mm-hmm.
I did. Whether it was internally in my head, whether it was with food, whether it was dating people I had no business dating, it did not matter to me, because I was punishing myself for the crime. But in the big picture, it wasn't a crime.
Right.
So we have to look at forgiving ourselves. And I know a lot of times we fixate on forgiving all kinds of people around us, but we will never truly forgive anybody around us until we work on forgiving ourselves.
Y'all, it just got really heavy in this room. It just got really heavy in this room, that I think about how many mistakes we are going to make trying to correct the one that was made years ago. We get the same person and we attract the same person in our lives. We do things destructively to ourselves.
Absolutely.
Just trying to do that. Or we spin our wheels trying to do enough good to make up for something that happened. And we kill ourselves. But I have to do it. But I have to do it. But I have to do it, because we're trying to make up for some sin. Now, here's the deal. My Jesus thing is, Jesus is the savior for my sins. I cannot make up for that. I can't pay for it. I can't go back and do a do-over. And I love in my belief system and what I believe, and truly when we bring those things into our God room and we lay them down, it's and ask for forgiveness, it's as if they never happened. It's not like you can erase it and kind of see what used to be there. It's as if it never happened. We have to also then, in the not God room, not take it back out with us and go back out in the world still carrying it. Now, I know, and you give a really good therapeutic way, because I know that not everybody believes like I do.
Right.
But
well, yeah, I mean, I work with people who have a Baha'i faith. They have or Baha'i faith. They have.
I have a Baja faith, a burrito
Baja
from Baja
burrito.
burrito. Yeah, that's I also have that.
But they may be agnostic. They may be atheists. I work with people who are all over the board, and I love every one of them, because we all have, we all have our way of processing. Now, for me, my forgiveness around, my experience with my grandmother, it wasn't like it never happened. It's still with me. If I talk about it, I can talk about it now, and I don't feel bad and I don't have regret, but my heart pings a little bit because it was like, oh man, what I wouldn't have given as an adult now at 58 years old to have that time with her. Right. But
Suzanne wants to offer. She talked to you to put you to sleep. She didn't want you to worry about her. And as a grandmother, she was trying to comfort you instead of you comfort her.
And Suzanne knows I appreciate her words. Suzanne also knows my daddy. And Suzanne knows that sometimes there are just people in this world that when they know your truth like that, they don't let you let that go.
Yeah.
Look, talk about them spirit worlds, all that.
I know. I just saw that
coming around. Y'all say
said,
shout out to my grandma real quick because she's with us.
She is.
But it's true, and yes, sometimes people, we just have a really hard time forgiving ourselves. And we do. You make a very valid point, Devon, that a lot of times we work ourselves to the bones trying to make up for what we've done. But there's not enough work to be done out there because real talk, it's about forgiving ourselves. And that means we have to actually acknowledge that we are that person that did that. I have people that'll say to me, and I've said it myself, I'm not that kind of person that fill in the blank. And I'm like, well, but you did do that, right? And they're like, well, yeah, I did it, but that's not me. I'm not that kind of person. Well, with all respect, you were that kind of person in that moment. So in that moment, and life is full of a lot of moments. So we get to go, you know what? That moment doesn't define me.
Amen. That is, y'all, that was one of those Teri nugget drops. Boom. And, in that moment but life has a lot of moments.
It has a lot of moments.
Elizabeth said, forgiving myself is always the hardest for me. And when I was in my teens and 20s, I found so many ugly and self-destructive ways to punish myself. Whew. And Candy, my different was when I forgave myself and worked on healing my inner child, I became aware of the fact that I was with another broken person and I couldn't fix them or stay with them. I could love him as a person, as a friend, but not as a partner or close relationship. Now that is what I call some severe forgiveness. That's when that thing was. Forgiveness does not mean you stay. Forgiveness doesn't mean you forget everything they did. You acknowledge this happened to me because of this person. But when you let go of it, you don't carry the box of rocks. Tell people you do this little exercise, and it was huge for me. And Teri does this in the office. And even if I tell you what it is, you literally are going to freak out when she does it. The bag of rocks. We did it at our last big session.
We did it at our last. We did it at our last workshop, and I love it because what it is it is a canvas geologist bag, not very big, and it carries in it. There are rocks in it. And these rocks represent, I've marked them all. There's one black rock that's about the size of a cantaloupe, and it represents death of anything, not just physical, but of anything. And then there are other rocks in there that are placed with neglect, abandonment, fear, self-harm. There's different rocks in there. And what you do is you lay these rocks out, and then you choose the ones that resonate with you, maybe not in your current, if you've been on a self-aware path for some time, you may not be carrying those rocks anymore, but you pick out the ones that you currently have a bonding or a relationship with or experience with. You put them in that bag, and then you lift that bag and you literally carry it around with you. People take turns carrying it around. And it is amazing how much the physicality changes in your body because your body is carrying that weight. That is no different than having a backpack on your back or a Superman or woman cape on and having everybody's troubles tucked in those inseams in those pockets. So we have to decide what we're willing to lay down, and also not be scared to walk in that lightness. Because sometimes when we're walking and our feet are barely touching the floor because we're super light, we're afraid it's not going to last. And it will last as long as we nurture it and breathe life into it. Yes, we live in a world where there are constantly going to be challenges. That is not rocket science, right? But it's how we address those challenges. It's how we meet those things. You
Mm.
know, when people say, is life treating you well? My question is, how are you treating life? That's the
So that's
question.
what you do. That's what you do.
Well,
It's like, but it's true.
but
It is
life's just
true.
happening, right? I mean, like
Uh-huh.
life is just unfolding. How are
Mhm.
we showing up to it?
Well, I'm going to tell you that I don't know about y'all. And I was talking to my sister and she said something about Mercury being in retrograde. And she said, but it went out. And I said, when? She said, like a week ago. And I said, well, it's been like the worst week of my life. I guess I need Mercury to go backwards or something because I was doing okay. And it's like, what the heck? I mean, it's just been this crazy. Have y'all experienced that too, where you just go, what's going on in this planet? Like this last 2 weeks have been really challenging for me and really tough. And, and I think about going through the going through the high weeds like I've kind of been in. Elizabeth says, yes, it's been tough for her too. And you get in those high weeds and you go, I can't even move through this. But the
And
truth is you can.
you can, and all you have to do in that moment is go, you know what, right now I'm having a challenging moment moving through this, so I can just take a beat right now. I can just pause for just a second. What direction would I like to move in? What do I need to do to move in that direction? Is it taking a nap? Is it asking for a hug? Is it getting some good food in your belly? Is it folding that pile of laundry that you got that you've been looking at it, hoping that the elf on the shelf jumps in and folds it for you? It's all of those things.
Corinne says,
You
yep,
know,
I take a nap,
yes, and I'm telling you what, those charging and you and I talk about charging stations. Those are things that we plug into when we are feeling overwhelmed, underwhelmed, when we're feeling all of that. We plug into these charging stations, and if a nap is what you need, that's your body's way of saying, you know what, you've been in survival mode a long time, and now we just need to I need to recharge. And a nap is the perfect way to do that. However, some of us as adults, probably a whole lot of us as adults actually, have been raised not just by parents, but by society, that idle hands get you in trouble. And if you're not doing something, then you're wasting time and yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm here to tell you that is rubbish, because we don't rest when we need to rest. We don't oftentimes we don't take that pause when we need it. And if we're not willing to do that, I can assure you that the universe, God, the big kahuna, the buttercup in the backyard, whoever it is you consider your higher power, will give you one of those breaks when you least expect it, if you're not willing to take it when they nudge you.
Joyce joins us, and she just joined us. She said, I miss a lot of this today, but I can surely relate. I have to inspire myself every day and breathe.
Absolutely.
Breathing is something that you really turned me on to, because I would go, sometimes I would be driving and caught in traffic, and I take that breath, and I have allergies, so I might start coughing when I just did, but I did it. But it's crazy how much that breath will still that anxiety inside. Anxiety over a lack of forgiveness is a real thing. When we don't think that, well, why can't I forgive? Why can't I just move on from this? People at church tell me I don't have enough faith because I can't move on. People at work say, we're tired of hearing that. Why can't you just forgive and move on? What does forgiveness look like? In our last part of the show, let's talk about what forgiveness looks like in different situations. Let's say we had harm perpetrated on us by a parent. Maybe it was something that violated us. That's a tough one. How do we move past that? And what does forgiveness look like?
Well, forgiveness is going to be individualized. But in a nutshell, I want to start by saying this. If your brain has been implicitly programmed with fight or flight, if you are in crisis mode from a young age, then you will nearly always, your brain will always look for that fight or that flight or that bear or that trouble. And when it is not present, your brain will take something and create it for you.
Mm.
So inevitably, the other shoe is always going to drop. Yes, we live in a world where there are lots of shoes and they're always going to drop. But I've said this a million times. We get to decide, is it a steel toe boot that knocks us out, or does it bounce off of us like a flip flop? Our choice. I'm not saying that forgiveness is an easy thing, but it also does not have to be like moving a mountain. So we have to prioritize, and maybe it's bite size. What, in best case scenario, like what's done is done, right?
Mhm.
What's done is done. Now we can live from a place of a victim, and I
Mhm.
don't use that word lightly, but we can live from a place of a victim or from a martyr, where we punish ourselves and we never reach our full potential because something was done to us years ago. When we sit in our big chair, we realize that, you know what, something was done to us years ago,
Mhm.
but I can harness that and I can use it to work for me today.
Mm.
I can extract some awareness. It doesn't have to be goodness. And I can allow myself to write a letter, to send, have a conversation with someone who's no longer present in this, physically on this earth, to have a conversation with someone who is still here. Most importantly, start with having that conversation with yourself.
Mhm.
What is it that you are doing to yourself that feeds the desire to still be, bonded or hold on to that? And it can be anything from somebody physically harming us to somebody, saying something that's just not nice. And I was in the first grade, went to Burton Elementary, and I don't remember much about the first grade, but I do remember being on the playground one day, and this little boy that was in our class that was just the bee's knees, if bees even have knees, he was that. And I remember him asking me if I would be his girlfriend, and I was so excited, and I said yes. And then all the kids screamed April Fools because it was April Fool's Day, and I didn't know.
Oh.
And that crushed me as a little kid.
Mhm.
But as an adult, now I can sit around and go, oh, people they're so mean to me and they just hurt me and they just, or I can just have that little one inside me going, golly, that was not fair. You know what? It's not fair. But I don't need the love of that person to love myself. They're
Oh,
not, they're not the missing part in our life.
yes.
They're not the missing element. We're the
Yeah.
missing element in our life.
And it's funny how those little things that happen. 218 Monroe Drive, we just moved in. My mom and dad got me a bike and put it together. And it was a struggle for them to get that bike for me.
Mhm.
It was a real struggle. And um, I didn't know it now. And as an adult, I look back and realize that that one Christmas gift was a lot for them to come up with. And I rode that bike down. I had the sparkly blue banana seat with a sissy bar in the back, and I had cards that I had fastened like the other kids. So it would when you rode. And I went by this house that was in the neighborhood, and all the kids ran out. I thought, oh, good, I'm going to be a friend. I'm going to get friends. I'm going to fit in. And the oldest girl, her name was Dee Bowen. I'll never forget it. She ran up to me and pulled me over, and she pulled me off the bike and punched me in the stomach and took my bike and messed up the handlebars and threw it over in the ditch and then just walked away. And all the other kids went behind her. And I have carried that my whole life. And then I realized in that moment, I learned how to take care of myself because my mama went down with her house shoe. My little tiny mom went up to her and knocked on her mama's door. And it was just this come to Jesus meeting right there. And after that, I never had to worry about D Bowen anymore because my mom said, you have got to take care of yourself. And I said, what do I do, Mom? And my mom, who went to church all the time, she said, you're a tall girl. She said, knock the crap out of them. And what? This is my mom. And she said, you take up for yourself and don't let anybody run over you. And in that moment, I learned about that. And years later, I found forgiveness because Dee always struggled with her weight. Dee always struggled with being the big kid, the one. And so she kind of became a bully. Mona, just telling you, I'm a Miss Pat.
I know.
Yeah. And it's true. You've got to take up for yourself and you've got to stand up for yourself. But forgiveness for me in that I saw Dee from her standpoint. What makes a bully? See what makes the bully, and then you can find the forgiveness for the bully. And she was a really unhappy person. And so that's where we have to kind of find it. It didn't look like I'm not friends with her. I didn't call her up. I didn't do it. It was in my heart that I found the forgiveness.
Absolutely. And what we recognize is that a lot of times those patterns repeat themselves over and over and over. As we get older, we have bullies that show up. They have tribes of people that follow them and support them. And we have to work towards that forgiveness again.
Mm-hmm.
I say this all the time and people roll their eyes, and I'm okay with that. That behind every bully, when we're talking about bullies, is a need that's not being filled. And what I mean by that is there's a need to, whether it's be loved, be recognized, be seen. Children don't grow up to be bullies just for shits and giggles, and I see what Candy is saying here. Her son became a bully after he had been bullied over a year. So, there's at some point, we get there where it's like, okay, I can't do this anymore. So we do retaliate. And some people will say that's the best thing to do. But let's be real. When you and I were little and people bullied us, that's not the same as the bullying that goes on today. We live in a really ratcheted up world right now, and we got adults that bully adults, and they encourage their kids to bully. So that is a whole nother talk show.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do some more on that. I had persons, Regina says, grow up, make funny of me because I was a special needs person, but like at me now, I have a job and I show them. God bless you, Regina. And we're so glad when you join us here, and you always bring such good insight. Joyce said, I've had to do lots of forgiveness to my husband lately since he's done a big turnaround about 10 weeks ago. And he's told me and showed me that he had plans to treat me like I've always deserved, as he says. Just having to pray a lot and forgive a lot. If not, we'll never make it. And we've been together for nearly 40 years, just living with hope and believing.
There you go. And you revisit the hope and the belief every day. And some days it's going to be like, well, I don't know about this. And other days it's going to be like, you know what? Yeah. And you take the sum of that, right? Because they're all just moments.
They're all just moments. And there are a lot of moments.
There are a whole lot of moments. That's why I get tickled when somebody says, I'm just having a bad day. It's been the worst day ever. And I'm like, how in the world do you have an entirely bad 24 hours? Like, you got to work real hard.
Well, I can tell you.
You got to work real hard. If you're being honest, you got to work real hard to not see the good in order to have a really bad day.
Well, Rhonda says forgiveness is a choice. You may not get an apology from whatever happened to you as a child or even as an adult, but you can choose to forgive. It's hard as hell, but you're the only person that's hurting by not forgiving.
And what you recognize is once you start practicing, you implement that. And it's not about just going, oh, that's okay. Oh, that's okay. Oh, that's okay. Because then you just get yourself in a pattern of saying what you don't really mean. You're not really speaking with integrity. But when you start authentically forgiving people, you find out that one, you don't attract as many people that you have to forgive because you're attracting more people that aren't interested in harming you or being ugly.
Mhm.
And sometimes people they're not even aware that
Mhm.
they do things because we're carrying our experiences, we're carrying our situations, we're carrying our wounds and our little envelopes of neglect around with us. And some people aren't even aware they have stepped on that nerve. And how many times
Yeah.
do we bite down on that and hold them? They did this to me,
That's
and
why
it's
my
just,
favorite dog is a pit bull. I hold on.
yeah, and it's like, well, wait a minute, do they even know that they harmed you?
Yeah,
I
no.
don't care. It
True.
don't matter. They did it. And it's like, well, you have fun with all that, because that is, you're doing that to yourself. And people don't like it. I have people tell me all the time, I don't like it when you say that. And I'm like, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. I want people to live their best life.
And here's my thing about forgiveness too. Don't continue. I always say, don't continue in bad relationships where you're constantly having to forgive someone um, every single day of your life or whatever. It's okay to forgive them and move on to another relationship where it's more equitable, where it's more
Mm.
joy, where you get the joy, where you get the happiness. It's, uh, it's, I always say there are a lot of people don't spend years living in a mistake just because it took you so long to make it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, when you forgive someone, um, and I say letting yourself off the hook, but it's not really letting yourself off the hook. But basically, what you're doing is you're
Mhm.
saying, you know what, I'm choosing not to revisit this over and over, because I'm choosing not to um, create dysregulation in my body. Because what that means is, every time, if you say I've forgiven them, but then you bring it up in your girl talk, or I've forgiven them and you bring it up the next time they do something, or I
Mhm.
forgive them and you bring it up however many times you bring it up with how many different therapists you work with, it's something that you keep bringing. It's the centerpiece to the
Mhm.
table. You keep bringing it and sitting it there. At that point, that person is no longer harming you. You're doing the harm to yourself, because what
Mhm.
happens is, every time you revisit that, if you're processing it to heal it, that's one thing. If you're revisiting it just because you just need to tell that story again, you're sending the same signals to your brain. You're sending the same cortisols to your body. You're doing the damage to yourself. You're riling yourself up on the inside. And that's not that person doing that. That's
It's
us.
us repeating the history. Candy
Absolutely.
says, yes, Terry, you attract people differently. And if they do step on that nerve, I say, nope, I don't accept that. I love it. Joyce adds, forgiving is for our sanity, I think. Yes. And,
Absolutely.
and Candy, don't stay in that relationship. You have to keep forgiving them for being themselves. If look, you know whether or not you mesh, you know if they are what they are, what they are, what they are. Maybe my grandfather, who was a Baptist preacher, and he'd say, but you know, did you make the decision or did God make the decision? Were you equally yoked? Sometimes you unequally yoked in your business relationship, in your marriage, in your relationships with friends. If you are unequally yoked, he said, a big ox and a little ox are never going to plow the same field the right way. You got to be equally yoked. And that's the way a farmer thought about it, but that's the way our hearts are too. So I always say it's okay to move on. Forgiveness doesn't mean you become best friends and go to lunch and everything moves on. Sometimes, if, I had a friend and her father perpetrated something horrific upon her as a child, and it set something in motion for her life. And her forgiveness came later, and it was, I honor him for giving me life.
Mm-hmm.
I honor him because without him, this genome would not have taken place.
Mm-hmm.
So I honor that and I move away because that person was damaged in their own way. I don't want any more to do with that person. And that's okay. And forgiveness can look like that. Forgiveness can mean I'm not looking at that person and being with them anymore.
And here's the other thing is, when some people are in relationships and they have been in them for long times and they or for a long time and they don't want to leave, that's okay too. That's okay
Yes,
too.
absolutely.
It's okay. Nobody gets to be the judge and the jury of our life except ourselves, but we also have to be ready to be accountable for that. So
Mhm.
when things aren't going the way we plan, we have to pivot and we have to modify and we have to find
Mhm.
out, what can I extract out of this moment? And again, we talk in our conversations, and our launch date goes in a lot of different directions. So there's a long spectrum or a long, scale
Mhm.
of what can be unhealthy in a relationship. Um, but there is, first and foremost, and people that love you should adhere to this, a no judgment policy. You want to support. If you need somebody's opinion, ask for their opinion. But we also have to be accountable that when we find ourselves in friend circles, in intimate relationships with our partners, when we find ourselves in intimate relationships with our husbands and our wives, we find ourselves with bosses or coworkers, and we become complacent and then we complain, we are responsible for a large portion of that. And we don't always like the way that tastes. And we
Mhm.
don't have to. I didn't like Brussels
Mhm.
sprouts for a long time, and now they're one of my favorite veggies. So we can acclimate. And when we start healing and we start acknowledging and we start forgiving ourselves first and foremost, and then others, what we recognize is that our palette gets bigger. Our friend circles may not get bigger, but man, don't they get richer.
Yes,
No,
yes.
it, it's
Preach.
it's we begin to savor this gift of life.
Mhm. For me, I think it's important because I know that in my life I've changed a lot through the years, and um, I think if we want someone to accept that we have changed, if I want someone, have to accept that they have changed. So it's like, and I really, really respect staying with a husband that has agreed. Joyce, her story, she's been so open and honest and sharing. And Joyce, I so respect what you've chosen because you're living by the, if I can change, I have to accept that somebody else can change as well. And if you see someone doing the work, the alcoholic who's going to meetings and is truly in recovery, the drug addict who has made amends and has been sober over a year and is working his program or her program every day, allowing ourselves to walk in new light with those people allows us to know that we can also make changes in our own lives. So that's putting a bow on today. I want everybody to find out how they can get in touch with Teri, because Teri is life changing for me. That's why we started doing this show.
And I appreciate you. I appreciate you. I appreciate everyone that listens with us and shares with
Mhm.
us, because what a gift that is.
Oh,
What a
y'all
gift
committed.
that is.
Every week y'all have so much. I mean, I've watched people just develop in this group and finding their voices.
Hmm. Finding their voices and cuddling their heart. That's good stuff.
Oh, I love this. Asparagus, Candy says, is her vegetable.
There you go.
And Candy says, I've changed and now I really think about who I accept into my orbit. Y'all are in there. Oh,
As are you and mine. So yes,
absolutely.
absolutely.
Elizabeth, I absolutely do our Wednesdays. I'm great for all that join us. Yes. And God forgives, Joyce says, and we need to forgive, not always forgetting, but it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, we're humans. We're not going to, we forget a lot from childhood. We don't typically forget a lot from our adulthood.
Mhm.
We do if we're in the denial phase. It's real quick to go like, oh, it's all good. It's all good. And then all
I'm
of a
fine.
sudden it's not good. So, but it all boils down to our level of willingness to be accountable to ourselves first and foremost. And when we talk about forgiveness, it's so much more than just, um, saying that you forgive somebody. There's a process to forgiveness that actually can leave you feeling more whole than you ever felt prior.
Leslie says, hard session for me today because I know I still have some things to work through. God bless you, Leslie. And thank you for that vulnerability and for sharing
Absolutely.
that. Because if you have trouble forgiving, I'm in trouble. I had somebody I couldn't forgive for a long time. And then one day I just woke up after praying and God, you got to put forgiveness in my heart because I can't do that. I've been hurt by someone so badly. And one day I woke up and didn't wish them dead. And I'm just being that's just real talk. I wanted them to die in a fiery accident. And that was killing me.
Mm-hmm.
And one day after years of just, God, you're going to have to do it. You're going to have to do this work in me. And one day when I didn't want them that, and then all of a sudden I just couldn't find hatred in my heart anymore, and I think that's where it is. That's when I higher powered it. And that worked for me. So Leslie,
that's when you gotta check your friend circle too, because when you wake up one day and you don't have that in your heart anymore, and then they're all like, "Girl, I don't know what you're talking about," and it's like, "Hang on a minute now, sis. Like, we got to talk about this." Like, got to be careful, and you got to be able to check people when they want to put you back in that pocket of pain. When you've worked your way to get out of it, and they want to stick you back in it because it works for them. That's when it's time to boundary up and reassess those situations. So,
and Corinne says, realizing that sometimes we are in need of help. Yes. Well, speaking of, if you need to reach me, devonoday@gmail.com. And Teri, you put a bow on this puppy. Tell them how to reach you and bring her to a close.
I can be reached at teripugh.com. And as always, we appreciate each and every one of you who share with us, who listen. Maybe you listen and you don't share anything, and you're equally appreciated. I personally look forward to these Wednesdays every week. Quite honestly, we don't usually know what we're talking about until the morning of, because that's just how the universe works sometimes. And I actually kind of love it. So until we see you all next week, please increase the peace and have yourself a beautiful day.
And a merry little Christmas.
That's right. And a happy New Year too.
Bye.